Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you always by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Nick Robin, and we are here in beautiful Montauk, New York. On the last podcast, I mentioned that I moved to New York for the next month. Yes, I know, during a pandemic, probably not the best time, but I look at it this way. My friend, who's coaching baseball in the East Hamptons all summer, has a place free of charge. So there's not many times that you have the opportunity to move to New York, have free room and board. And the best part is the city is completely empty. I went by Times Square last week and there wasn't a soul in sight, which is, for anyone that knows New York, Times Square is the biggest tourist attraction, probably one of the biggest tourist attractions in the United States. So it's just me and the city all to my lonesome. And I came out to Montauk, which was the original reason of my trip, to visit some friends. They have a beautiful house here right on the water. So yes, that is the ocean that you are hearing in the background. And I was in the city on Wednesday getting groceries with my friend, and it just started profusely just pouring down. Like, I'm not talking just like a light summer drizzle, but like probably one of the most rain I've ever seen, maybe in my entire life. Being from San Diego, we don't get much much rain there. So that was quite a transition coming from San Diego, 70 to 75 most days, and then coming into New York and being like, why the fuck am I here when I was already in paradise back home, living at my parents' house, but needed to get out of that. And I think my stepdad was more than happy to get me the fuck out. He drove me to the airport at 5 a.m. on Tuesday just so I would get on the plane. So thank you for that, Rob. And so yeah, I arrived here yesterday in Montauk, and honestly, it's paradise. It's just a little island a little area at the very end of Long Island, east of the Hamptons. And right now I'm in a house, and there's about 14 to 16 people staying here this weekend, and unfortunately I'm the only one technically unemployed. Podcasting, I guess, can be a job as well, but yeah, so they're all on conference calls all day, and I'm just sitting here being like, wow, I feel like a complete piece of shit. They're just on conference calls in all different areas of the house. I'm just sitting here like on my computer, like reading up articles on the NBA, being like, I'm kind of doing work here, but it's just not the same. So moving on though, and actually one last thing. So I came here last summer, 4th of July weekend, and the moment I get here, it's just full on party. We're drinking, whatever, doing all that fun stuff. And I come here yesterday and everyone's just sitting around on their desktops, everyone's got 2 monitors. And I'm just like, wow, this is kind of the transition of what it means to send it when you're in your mid to later 20s, where I feel like now it's like, once the weekend hits, it's full go until Monday morning. Whereas in your early 20s, you're partying just 24/7, and your body's able to recuperate better. Now it's like, I get drunk, I wake up, and the hangover probably lasts almost 2 days now. It's the problems of getting older, I guess. But moving on to today's show, we'll dive into overtime sensation Mikey Williams' top 10 college list. And then, should there be an asterisk on this season? The Spurs are still getting shit for it nearly over 20 years later, so we'll dive into that. And then on Nick's picks, the best second-round draft picks since 2000. But first, a look at Bol Bol's surprising debut and what that means for the Nuggets' strategy in Orlando. So on Wednesday night, Bol Bol, who's a second-round draft pick out of Oregon, made his NBA debut. He is the son of 7'7" Monte Bol, who unfortunately passed away in 2010. Trust me, it's not easy to be that tall. You don't live as long. My friend who played football at University of Arizona keeps telling me how he needs to pop out a couple kids by the time he's 25 because he doesn't know how long he's going to live. He's a big 6'4", 300 pounds, and those type of guys, I mean, the heart can just pump so much blood that quickly. So, sorry, off topic there, but so Bol Bol, he's been hampered by foot injuries all year. He was drafted in the second round out of Oregon, and he was projected to be a lottery pick coming out of high school, but he injured himself during his 1 year at Oregon, and luckily for the Nuggets, they actually got two guys who fell to them in back-to-back years. The other one being Michael Porter Jr., who fell to them at 14th overall, and then Bol Bol, who came to them at 44th overall, second-round draft pick, which means they don't get guaranteed contracts. So they're playing under a little bit of stress there. But they knew they were getting a good deal on him in the second round, and he blossomed last on Wednesday night, posting 16 points, including 2 threes from a guy who's 7'2", 10 rebounds, and 6 blocks. Not a bad debut. I mean, again, these are scrimmages. They're not real games, but nonetheless, you're still playing against NBA competition. And due to his performance, he got hit with a random drug test right after. So the question is, what should we think about Bol Bol's performance? And like spring training, scrimmages, they're not real games. The stats don't count. So I don't think we should look too much into it. And just to provide some other examples, in 2002, and this is opening night, Gordon Gurisic, who don't even know who that is, scored 29 points in his NBA debut. And, he's now out of the league. He was out of the league in less than 2 years. So there goes to show you that just because you scored 29 points, which is also an NBA, is the most points that someone has scored in their NBA debut since the year 2000. And looking at Lonzo Ball's strong performance in the 2017 Summer League, preseason games don't mean jack shit. But I will mention that Bol Bol's performance, he was the only rookie in 20 years to register at least 15 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 blocks in a preseason game. Thank you to ESPN Stats and Information Research on that one. So, yes, I guess we could take it with a bigger grain of salt than what we typically would, because these preseason games are a little bit different. We are preparing. This isn't NBA Summer League. This isn't preseason where no starters are playing, because we're still getting starter minutes from Nikola Jokic, and we're going to get into that in a sec with the Nuggets' supersized lineup. So the Nuggets had only 8 healthy players arriving to Orlando. And with that, Coach Mike Malone thought he'd experiment a little bit with the lineup, and he put out a monstrous lineup with Nikola Jokic at 7 foot, playing the point guard, Jeremy Grant as the other guard, Bol Bol at 7'2", as I mentioned, forward, Paul Millsap at 6'7", and then at center, Mason Plumlee at 6'11". So here is a quote from Mike Malone. Quote, "You've heard for years now that this game is truly a positionless game in the modern era," Malone said before the game. Quote again, "Well, we're going to find out how that holds tonight. So putting guys in different positions, making them a little bit uncomfortable, making them experience a position and responsibilities that they've never had to really think about before. It's only going to help them. It definitely can't hurt," end quote. And the experiment went 50-50. They won the game 89-82 against the hapless Washington Wizards, who are without Bradley Beal and, of course, John Wall. But they also had 25 turnovers, which is about double the amount they typically have in a normal game. And now, some fun facts on this starting lineup. First off, the average height was 82.4 inches. There have only been 5 other instances of a team using a starting lineup that was that tall or taller since lineups were first listed in the box score in 1970-71. And this was the first time ever that a 7-footer was put at the point guard position. So it's a lot to think about, and let's see. The Rockets are going in the opposite direction, doing the whole small ball lineup. Mike Malone is going with the bigger is better method. And it worked in this scenario, but I don't see it pulling through because I just don't think these guys are quick enough. Jokic, Bol Bol, Paul Millsap, Mason Plumlee are quick enough to guard players such as Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, LeBron James, Anthony Davis. Guys are going to see in the Western Conference Finals if they even make it there. So it's going to be interesting to see what other strategies that teams use in Orlando, because honestly, I mean, this is the time. There's no fans. This is kind of, people want to, at this point, it's kind of a lost season. Yes, there will be a winner, but I can't imagine what that's going to look like in Game 7 of the NBA Finals with no fans in there. They win it all, and then the celebration. There's no fans, limited media. It's just going to be a surreal feeling once a champion is crowned. It's just not the same, and like afterwards, you can't even really celebrate. No clubs are open. We all know back in 2016, after the Cavs won in the incredible 3-1 comeback, they went to Excess in Vegas to celebrate, but there's not going to be any of that this year. So, and I did watch a couple of the scrimmages, and it was very odd. They had the fans, fake fans on the television. They had the announcers, or not the announcers, over the PA system. They had the Go Nuggets chant, and it's odd. It's strange. It's a new norm, I guess. Don't really know how I feel about it, but we're about to get a whole lot of it. And but we'll get into more of this and more in the third segment, where I will be examining, should there be an asterisk on this season. I've had feelings about it when it comes to steroid users and strike-shortened seasons, and I've kind of changed my opinion on it a little bit, so we'll get into that more later. But next, after this commercial break, we will be looking at overtime sensation Mikey Williams' top 10 college list that he just released Wednesday on Twitter. So stay tuned for that after this commercial break. But before we cut to commercials, take a listen at that beautiful Atlantic Ocean right in front of me.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So we just discussed the amazing debut of Bol Bol and what that means for the Denver Nuggets and their supersized lineup. forgot to mention the hilarious tweet that Rockets GM Daryl Morey posted of, I'm blanking on the name of the movie, but the movie with Jack Black. He's big. He goes into the city with a bunch of tiny little people, and then he posts the photo of Jack Black's character, who's like typical 5-6 foot, being tied up by these little people, just showing you that the bigger they are, the harder they fall, and we'll see if that's true for this Nuggets team. It'd be interesting to see them play the Rockets, big versus small. With the Nuggets, their shortest player is 6'7", and that being the tallest player on the Rockets. So that would be an interesting matchup to see in round 2. Now moving on to Mikey's top 10, and I'm talking about Mikey Williams. So let's start. Who is Mikey Williams? He's an incoming sophomore guard, an overtime phenom from San Diego, California. He goes to San Ysidro High School, which is right by the border. So when I was in high school, my high school basketball team, we played San Ysidro in the city semifinals. They had this amazing guard named Javion Watson. He averaged like 30 points a game, which in San Diego County is unheard of. No one averages that much. The guy was a 3-point sniper. He ended up going to Long Beach State. Things didn't really work out there for him, and I think he transferred out of there, but end of this, not part of the story. So it's the city semis. Torrey Pines versus San Ysidro. We're the all-white school. They're a little more Hispanic, a couple black kids on the team. We were just an all-white team, those white fundamentals. And this is a very poor choice, but from our student section, but we started chanting the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem, whichever one, because San Ysidro was right on the border to Mexico, so, but non-PC story there for you. So yeah, he goes to San Ysidro High School. The guy's followed by LeBron James. He has highlights all over Overtime, which is a sports website or a website that prioritizes itself in prep sports, predominantly basketball. So Mikey Williams, he's considered a top 3 player in the class of 2023, and he tweeted out on Wednesday, "I appreciate every college that has recruited me up until this point, but here's my top 10. Let's rock." And the list includes only 1 blue blood, Kansas, 2 mid-majors, 2 Power 5s, and then 5 HBCUs. We'll get into the HBCUs in a sec, but so far he has Kansas. Not sure why he chose Kansas over Duke or Kentucky or UNC, but yes, he has Kansas. Hometown San Diego State. Memphis, who has Penny Hardaway, who has, in his short time there, is known to be a great recruiter. But with most great recruiters, he got hit with some illegal recruiting tactics with projected number 1 pick James Wiseman last year. So that was unfortunate to see. USC, who's also been hit with was part of that federal investigation back in 2017. ASU, who was also a part of that investigation as well. And then Alabama State, Texas Southern, North Carolina Central, Hampton University, and Tennessee State. So half the schools are HBCUs. We got into it last week, or a couple weeks ago now, with Maker, who chose Howard University being the first 5-star recruit to commit to an HBCU. So Alabama State and Texas Southern are in the SWAC. Alabama State's new head coach is former NBA star Mo Williams. So that's probably helped with recruiting so far. And then in the MEAC conference, North Carolina Central, the Big Southampton University, and then Tennessee State of the OVC. So, why an HBCU? A lot of it, of course, has to do with the current social climate, but Mikey Williams' mother was also a former softball player and graduate from Hampton University. And of course, Maker, God, these names. So Maker, and his recent commitment to Howard University has drawn a lot of interest. Mikey Williams has tweeted out before that he wouldn't mind going into an HBCU, and really, why not? Build your own legacy. If you're truly that great of a player, it doesn't matter where you go to college. If you perform, you will get drafted. And at an HBCU where the talent level is not as high as a typical Power 5 conference or even possibly a mid-major, because I would say these HBCUs are more, I don't even know what the word is for below, a low major. So yes, these low major schools, he's going to ball out. He's going to put up big numbers. It might not be against the best competition, but it will still prepare him for the NBA. And more than likely, I hate to say it before they even announce it, but Mikey Williams is the type of one-and-done player that we've seen over the course of the last 10, 15 years now, since I think 2005, they made it mandatory that you have to go to college. You have to be at least 19 years old or a year removed from high school to enter the NBA draft. So I personally would like to see Mikey Williams stay local and go to San Diego State. There, he can build out his own legacy. He can be the man. We have never had our highest ever ESPN recruit was Winston Shepard. I think he was around in the low 50s. Kawhi was around 57. So we've never had a top 10 player in the country commit to San Diego State. And back in the day when I worked for the team, I asked our assistant coach, why don't five-star, top 10, top 25 players in the country commit to San Diego State? First off, it's a beautiful school. It's in sunny San Diego. Not the best part of San Diego, but you're still in San Diego. The weather year-round is amazing. The women, yes, the women are very pretty. Go on Instagram, and you'll see. And the school itself is really not that difficult of a school. And if you're only coming for a year, why not San Diego? Why go spend a cold winter in Kentucky or Duke or UNC? Why spend yourself being miserable, or Michigan, freezing your ass off when you can head over to the Aquaplex at San Diego State, hang out by the pool, go to practice, hit the beach if you want. But the problem here with SDSU is SDSU does not succumb to one-and-done players. They've had guys like Malik Pope in 2014. Winston Shepard came in 2012. These guys thought they were going to be one-and-done, come in, ball out, and leave. Both of them ended up staying all 4 years. Neither of them ended up making it to the league. So I think maybe the pedigree of NBA players coming out of San Diego State might frighten some players in coming here. So that would be, I'd say, the biggest turnoff to a lot of top 25, top 10 players in the country making their way down to the Mesa on Montezuma. But there is proof in the pudding. Kawhi Leonard, of course, came to San Diego State in 2010, and in 2011, led San Diego State to a 34-3 record, a Sweet 16 appearance, the first one in school history. If not for a couple blunders against Kemba Walker in Connecticut, they actually could have won that game. They had a very senior, besides Kawhi, they had a very senior-led team. I believe all starters besides Kawhi were seniors that year, and they were dominant. They, of course, had the amazing defense with Kawhi Leonard. They had a lottery pick player, or right outside, he went 15th. So they had the lottery player in Kawhi Leonard. They had the head coach, Steve Fisher, who had previously been to back-to-back NCAA championship games with the Fab Five and actually won the NCAA championship in 1989. But people don't count that because those weren't his players, because Bill Frieder, the head coach of Michigan that year, got fired on the eve of the NCAA tournament because he had committed to ASU, the head coaching job there, after the season. And the president of Michigan, or the AD, said, I want a Michigan man to coach a Michigan team. So he fired him, put Steve Fisher in charge, which is absurd to think about. On the eve of the tournament, you fire your head coach, the person who runs your entire program and has done a great job all year, just because he took another job, which is stupid to announce that. In Frieder's case, is probably not the smartest move to announce that before you head into the NCAA tournament, because your players aren't going to really trust you, because you know as soon as you guys are knocked out or win it all, you're leaving for what you think are greener pastures. So my point is here that Kawhi Leonard went to San Diego State. He balled the fuck out. He got drafted. He won Finals MVP. He's been in contention for League MVP. He's won 2 championships with 2 different franchises, which not just won the championship, it was Finals MVP as well, which only one other player has done, and that is LeBron James. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So 3 players have done that. So it just shows you that it can be done. You can go to a mid-major, you can have success there, and you can parlay that into success at the NBA level. Prime example right there. So whatever Mikey Williams decides to do, I hope, in my own personal opinion, I hope it's either San Diego State or it's an HBCU, a different path that players before him haven't taken. And if you're truly that good, it doesn't matter where you go to college, because scouts will find you, people will still be at the games, and it would just be great for one of these programs, whichever one it is, or San Diego State. So it's exciting to see, but he's still, the guy's only going to be an incoming sophomore. Maybe he'll forego his senior year and go early, but at this rate, we're still 3 years away. There's still so many things that can change. I'm surprised he's even cut his list down to 10 at this point, because, again, he has so much time. And, to be honest, we don't even know. Maybe he doesn't continue to develop at the same trajectory that he's already been producing at, and maybe he doesn't end up being a top 3 player in his class when the year 2023 comes along. But I wish him the best. As a fellow San Diego native, it's great to see our own make it on the national stage. And we've had, San Diego really hasn't had that many great players come out over the years. There's Chase Budinger, who was compared to Larry Bird. There's Norman Powell, who's with the Raptors. If you look down the list, there's really not that many great players that come from San Diego. Most of them come from the LA area, the Bay Area, New York, Florida, Texas. So I wish Mikey the best of luck, and we'll see what happens over the next couple of years. As a lot can change between now and 2023. Just look at 2020 compared to 2019. We were all expecting the best year of our lives, and we fell flat on our faces, but we're getting through it day by day. So after this commercial break, we will be looking at whether there should be an asterisk on this season. Shaq had some recent comments, that and more after this commercial break. Stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back live from Montauk, and it is just a beautiful day. Crisp 78 degrees. A little cloudy, but not much to complain about here because I have a perfect view of the Atlantic Ocean. I am just taking it all in. What a dream, podcasting while on vacation in Montauk. And we just got back from discussing Mikey Williams' top 10 college list, SDSU, Memphis, ASU, USC, along with 5 HBCUs, including Howard, where his mother went to school. But now we're moving on to, should there be an asterisk on this season? There's been a lot of talk around the league. Shaq came out with comments lately saying, quote, "It's an asterisk, baby. It will count for some people, but I'm not changing my opinion," end quote. Giannis came out and said, "I feel like at the end of the day, this is going to be the toughest championship you could ever win," end quote. So I have to agree with Giannis. This title's going to be tough. Everyone's playing under the same circumstances. They're all dealing with coronavirus while also trying to win a championship. They have their whole family to worry about and everything going back home, and they're stuck in Orlando in their hotel rooms with no way to be there physically for their family and loved ones. So that's got to be extremely tough on all these players. So you got to look at it that way. In terms of the asterisk, I feel like, yes, there will be an asterisk on this season, and I feel like there should be for any season that is abnormal. So look at the 1995 Atlanta Braves. They won in a strike-shortened seasons. There should be an asterisk just next to the championship just saying that there were less games played. It didn't make it any less tough or any less difficult in winning the championship. And everyone, and these strike-shortened seasons, it affects everyone, not just the team that won it all. So in 1998, 98, 99, during the Spurs run, the Lakers, the Celtics, the Knicks, every team that played that year was dealing with the same things that the Spurs dealt with, but the Spurs still came out on top. So where I stand on the asterisk is I had it all wrong. When I think of an asterisk, I feel like it means that I felt that it meant like it mattered less or it was less significant, whatever happened in that year. But it's more supposed to indicate that this particular season was different than the typical 82 game, 162 game, however many games they play in the NHL, the 16 games they play in the NFL. It just means that it was different in terms of the amount of games played. Doesn't make it any less hard it doesn't change anything. Doesn't make it easier that they played. Yes, I guess you're more well rested, but I don't think it makes it any easier to play less games. You still have to go out there and you still have to perform. And all these teams have. And, I mean, yeah, look at the 1919 White Sox scandal. That one, in particular, that's something that I feel like should have an asterisk on it because 8 players came out. They said they bet on themselves to lose the game. So that's been proven. So there, I feel like that in that kind of circumstance, there should be an asterisk for cheating. Like, point blank, they went to the court. They were found not guilty, but baseball saw it another way, banned the 8 players for life. That kind of thing, that should have an asterisk. That's something that does not happen every day. Or with the steroid users. And I'm going to start by saying I don't give a fuck if you took steroids. If you didn't take steroids, you still have to go out and hit a baseball, which is one of the hardest things in professional sports. And my opinion is easy. Barry Bonds, steroids or no steroids, was one of the greatest baseball players of all time. Steroids just made him the greatest baseball player that ever lived. So these guys who did use steroids, yes, I think there maybe should be an asterisk next to their name, just saying that they did test positive for performance-enhancing drugs. So in that case, the asterisk is more negative than it is positive. But I think in terms of an asterisk on the season, I agree, yes, there should be an asterisk just to point out, to indicate that, yes, during this time, we were going through a global pandemic, and these players were under different constraints than what is normal for a typical NBA championship. So that's one part of the answer, but then the next part is this isn't going to be an easy championship for anyone, and this is why. Again, everyone is playing on an equal playing ground. Everyone has received the same amount of rest / break, whatever you want to call it, due to this coronavirus. And now look at what's happened with each team. The Lakers now have a healthy LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And in LeBron's later years, he needs all the rest he can get. He's been at home with the family, chilling, relaxing, keeping his body, his temple in check. But can these new shooters, J.R. and Dion Waiters, J.R. Smith, Dion Waiters, can these guys go out and make these threes? Can they perform? The Clippers, healthy Kawhi and Paul George, only played 28 games together. And during those 28 games, they were 21-7. That's a 62-win pace. And they had an 8.0 point differential. That would be good for second in the NBA behind the Bucks. So, there. Rockets, Harden and Westbrook. That's all you need to know. They have 2 of the 15 best players in the league. When you have 2 of the 15 best players in the league, you have a shot at winning a championship. The Bucks, best player in the world, plus they have a solid supporting cast. Chris Middleton, one of the most underrated number 2 guys in the league. Eric Bledsoe, solid point guard, but can he perform in the playoffs when it matters most? In most years, no. But it's another season, another playoff run, so he'll be given another opportunity. Then they have Brook Lopez, a stretch 5, who is great for a team like this, doesn't need the ball in his hands that much. Kyle Korver, he might be 38, 39 years old, but he's still one of the greatest shooters of all time, and shooting isn't something that gets zapped due to athleticism. Shooting is something that will always be there. So, Kyle Korver, Brook Lopez, Eric Bledsoe, Chris Middleton, Giannis. You got the best player in the world. And they don't just have one of the best players in the world. They also have one of the best regular season teams in NBA history. Their 11.29 point differential is good for 5th all time. 5th all time in NBA history. Ahead of some of the greatest teams of all time, and right behind the 1971-72 LA Lakers with Wilt, Jerry West, the one title they won, 33-game win streak. The 1970-71 Bucks with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Oscar Robertson. The 95-96 Bulls, the 72-10 team at 12.24. And then the 2016-17 Warriors, 11.63. That was the first Durant title. So this isn't just any old regular season dominating team. This is one of the greatest teams in NBA history. So it's going to be tough for everyone who has to go up against not just the Lakers, not just the Clippers, but the Bucks, the Rockets, and moving forward, the Celtics. They have one of the most formidable starting lineups in the NBA. Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker, Gordon Hayward. Undersized, but just as talented as any other team in the league. Probably one of the most talented teams in the league if you think about it. And then you have the 76ers with 2 of the most talented players in the league in Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Can they learn how to play together? History has shown us not really. So there's a ton of great teams out there, so I don't know why we're talking about an asterisk, because this could be one of the more competitive playoffs in recent NBA history. This one, and then I remember 2011, 2012, you had the young Oklahoma City Thunder, you had the Miami Heat, you had the Chicago Bulls, you had the Lakers were still getting around a little bit, the Dallas Mavericks just came off a championship, so I'm expecting one of the best playoffs in recent history, because we have some very talented teams out there that are all itching for that first championship, because it could mean a lot to some of these players like Giannis, like Joel Embiid, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden are still ringless. Nikola Jokic, ringless. LeBron, and in LeBron's case, he get a first ring for AD and a 4th ring for himself, which would put him in a class all by himself. He would be the only player in NBA history to win the finals and win finals MVP, because more than likely it's either him or AD, but I would say LeBron would win Finals MVP between those two, depending on how the series goes. But he would be the only player in NBA history to win 3 championships with 3 different teams and be named Finals MVP. So we have that to look forward to, as well as Kawhi Leonard could also become the first player to win Finals MVP for 3 different teams if he leads the Clippers to a championship. And not just that, it would be the first championship in the history of the LA Clippers. Let's stay on that topic for a sec and think about how amazing of a year it has been for the city of LA in terms of their 2 basketball teams. The Lakers and the Clippers have been 1 and 2 nearly all season long, and we have LeBron James, the GOAT. People consider him the greatest player of all time, definitely the greatest player of his generation. And we have Kawhi Leonard, the silent assassin, a guy who does all his talking with his game and not with his mouth. And the fact that they're both vying for that third championship in Kawhi's case, 4th championship in LeBron's case, but for both of them, it would be their 3rd title with a 3rd franchise as the marquee best player on their team. So it's an exciting time for just to be an LA basketball fan. And honestly, I love LeBron, but the Clippers, they've been waiting patiently. The Chris Paul era, Lob City didn't work out, but they're hoping with Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and one of the deepest teams in the entire league that they will finally bring a championship to Clipperland. And how joyous would that be? Except for all those Lakers fans out there that haven't seen a championship since 2010, a decade and counting. So enough of the Asterisk talks. We're going to be moving on to Nick's picks right after this commercial break. And today we are looking at the best second-round draft picks, those guys that don't get guaranteed contracts since 2000. So stay tuned for that, and we will be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
We're back with you now, and we just discussed Shaquille O'Neal's recent comments on whether or not there should be an asterisk on this season. And I feel like, as I mentioned earlier, asterisks usually have a negative connotation, but I think in this regards to this pandemic and the season that we're going through, all an asterisk means is that it was a different season than what we typically expect from 82 games and the season finishing in 6 to 7 months rather than almost taking nearly a whole year to be completed. But what 2020 has shown us that things are unpredictable. Now, moving on to Nick's picks, and today we are discussing the best second-round draft picks since 2000. And for those out there that don't know, second-round draft picks don't get guaranteed contracts, which is absurd because there's only 2 rounds in the NBA draft every year. So that's only 60 players that get selected to be a part of the National Basketball Association. Unlike football that has 7 rounds and Major League Baseball that has 40 rounds. This year they actually only had 5 rounds due to COVID. And I think it's mind-boggling that only 60 players every year out of all 351 Division I college basketball teams, out of all the professional leagues in the world, in Europe, China, Serbia, it's just absurd that only 60 players get drafted because there's so many talented basketball players in the world, and it just shows how good you have to be to make it at this level. So, and the crazy part is all these second-round draft picks more than likely are not going to be making an impact in the NBA, but there are some players that do. So looking at some of the nominees here, there's Montrezl Harrell, Spencer Dinwiddie, Patrick Beverley, Chris Middleton, just to name some current active players. And these guys weren't even good enough to make our list. But some second-round players that we have to remember since 2000, we've seen one of the best shooters of all time in Kyle Korver, one of the better scorers in Milwaukee Bucks history in Michael Redd, for all of you that don't remember him. And we've seen a lot of contributors to title-winning teams, such as Trevor Ariza with the Lakers. So there are a lot of talented players that do come out of the second round, and typically they don't get the same respect, and they really have to earn every minute they go out and play. It's kind of like being a second-round draft pick is kind of like being almost a walk-on on a college basketball team where you basically have to earn every minute you get out there. It's like you were still drafted to the NBA, but not really. You don't have the same respect as someone who is a lottery pick or a first-round draft pick where they put in more money on you, where they kind of give you an incentivized to play you over guys who were second-round draft picks that are floating back and forth between the G League and the NBA. So a lot of these players come from humbling backgrounds. A lot of them were top players in college that draft stock took a hit right before the draft. So we're going to get into it now. And as always, we start with the honorable mentions. And I'm going to go with a couple more than usual today. So I'm going to start with Monte Ellis. So we're not in the top 5 yet. We're doing honorable mentions. So Monte Ellis drafted 40th overall out of high school by the Golden State Warriors. The guy averaged 38.4 points per game as a senior. In the NBA, he averaged nearly 25 points a game on 2 separate occasions. One time over 25, the other time right below. And it's funny because you were thinking the Warriors years ago, back in 2010, 2011, they were debating who to keep, Stephen Curry or Monte Ellis. Luckily for the Warriors, they made the right decision, trading Monte Ellis, keeping Stephen Curry. And, I mean, people will see how that's worked out with 5 straight finals appearances, 3 NBA championships. But Monte Ellis was no scrub himself. The guy averaged nearly 18 points and 4.5 assists a game for his career. He was part of the, I Believe, Warriors team that upset the number 1 seeded Mavs. That was their first playoff appearance in 12 years. And one thing that you love to see from a player who's 6'2", 6'3", barely 180 pounds is he twice led the league in minutes played. And this is a guy who's not that big, who gets to the rim a lot, takes a lot of hits. So the fact that he was able to lead the league back-to-back seasons in minutes per game is very impressive. Now, moving on to one of the most, I think at this point he might be a little bit overrated, but has made a huge impact and was one of the best shooters in his generation, and that is Danny Green, selected 46 overall by Cleveland, coming out of North Carolina. And some fun facts for you here. Number 1, he has the most three-point field goals made in finals history at 27, which he did in the 2013 NBA Finals against the Miami Heat, who historically came back with a Ray Allen shot and were seconds away from losing. And at one point in that series, he was 25 of 38 from three. So he was making nearly 70% of his threes. Unfortunately, this record ended up being broken by Stephen Curry in the 2016 NBA Finals. Number 2, fun fact, is along with Michael Jordan and James Worthy, along with Michael Jordan and James Worthy, he is the only player to win both an NCAA championship, which he did in 2009 with Tyler Hansbrough in North Carolina, and an NBA championship, which he's done on 2 occasions, in 2014 with the Spurs and last year with the Toronto Raptors. He's your quintessential 3-and-D player that you want on your team these days, and a career 40.2% three-point shooter, which is best for top 50 all time. Now, moving on to a player who I think is definitely going to be in the top 5 once this is all said and done, and that is Chris Middleton. He was drafted 39th overall by Detroit and ends up on the Milwaukee Bucks. This year, he was nearly became, and I mean barely almost became, the number 10 player to shoot 50% from the field, 40% from 3, and 90% from the free throw line. To be exact, he was 49.9%. 49.9% from the field, 41.8% from 3, and 90.8% from the free throw line. So we're talking about if he had one more extra made field goal, he would have become the 10th member of the 50-40-90 club. He is now a 2-time All-Star and probably the most ideal second option to Giannis, and hopefully can bring Milwaukee their first NBA championship since 1971. So 49 years in the making. Chris Middleton, a player who doesn't need the ball in his hands at all time, can also guard small forwards and power forwards. And like Danny Green, is probably a step up in terms of the superb 3-and-D guy that you need on your championship team. Now, moving on to the 2 players that were at the top of my honorable mention list. And we're starting first with Agent Zero, Gilbert Arenas, who in 2001 was selected 31st overall by the Golden State Warriors out of University of Arizona. He made a championship appearance against the Blue Devils that year. Unfortunately, they lost. And during his time in the NBA, although I feel like he kind of came and went, he was a 3-time All-Star, making 3 All-League teams, a second team appearance in 2007, and a third team appearance in 2005-06. He got the nickname Agent Zero due to the fact that he wore number 0, which was reference to the number of minutes critics said he would play in the NBA, and the fact that he became known as one of the most clutch players in the league. From 2002 to 2007, he averaged 24 points and 5.7 assists per game. Although he was more of a volume shooter, as he shot only 42.7% from the field, 36% from 3, which is great but not remarkable, which is solid but not remarkable, on 6.3 attempts per game. So he's definitely a player that I think might even thrive more today with how much players are shooting from the perimeter. He does, though, have a 60-point game against the Lakers in 2006 and holds the highest scoring average by a second-round draft pick since 2000. Unfortunately, in 2010, he signed a 6-year, $111 million contract, and knee injuries from that point derailed his career, and he was kind of out of the league. And we could talk about the firearm incident, but due to the injuries and stupid off-the-court incidents, he has found himself out of the league by the year 2012. So he did have a solid decade in the NBA, but due to some boneheaded mistakes, he is now out of the league. But at the time, he was one of the most exciting players of the mid-2000s. And now, my next guy, another honorable mention to one of the smallest players, but one of the smallest, most impactful players in NBA history, Isaiah Thomas, drafted 60th overall by Sacramento in 2011. He's been the best player on an Eastern Conference Finals team, Celtics against the Cavs in 2017, where he made an All-NBA second team. So he was rated a top 10 player in the league at only 5'9". And he is the shortest player to record a triple-double and make multiple All-Star team appearances. Unfortunately, after the 2017 season, where he heroically played in an NBA game after the death of his sister, he was traded to Cleveland in what might be looked at one of the coldest moves ever by an organization, which really just shows that this is a business. There is no loyalty. He went on to play for the Cavaliers, the Lakers, the Wizards, and has been dealing with hip injuries ever since. So, yes, it was a shitty move on the part of the Celtics, but they saw what was happening and made the correct business decision, and it looks like it's helped them out as they are now one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference and have a legitimate shot at making not only the Eastern Conference Finals, but the finals themselves. Now, moving on into our top five, and the first player on this list has a long career left ahead of him, but has already been one of the most impactful players in the league today, has made a first-team All-League, and is already 10th all-time in career triple-doubles at age 25, and that is Nikola Jokic, who has come into the bubble and looks to have lost at least 20 to 25 pounds. Again, he was 2019 All-NBA and was drafted 41st overall by Denver in 2014. He was one of the top players in Serbia, taking home the Serbian Player of the Year award in 2018. And again, at only 25 years old, he still has a long, illustrious career ahead of him. At 7 foot, he at times plays the point guard position, which is unworldly at his height and size. And last year finished third in MVP voting. So Nikola Jokic, number 5 on my list, but trending forward. Next, one of the best 6 men in NBA history, Lou Williams. In 2005, he was selected 45th by Philly, straight out of high school. He's a 3-time 6 Man of the Year award, winning the award in 2015 with the Raptors, 18 and 19 with the Clippers. And as of last season, he has the most career points off the bench. And during his time with LA the last 3 years, he has, instead of trajectory going down, he's gone up, averaging 20.5 points a game and 5.5 assists. And he's formed one of the best pick-and-roll duos in the league with Montrezl Harrell. Although typical of guys, second-round picks or NBA journeymen, he's played for 6 teams, and he's the first player in league history to record at least 30 points, 10 steals, and 7 assists in the game. Last year, he probably had his most marquee moment in the NBA as he had 36 points and 11 assists in helping the Clippers overcome a 31-point deficit against the Warriors in the first round. That is the biggest comeback in NBA playoff history. Not too bad for a second-round draft pick out of high school. Now, moving on to number 3, we have one of the greatest role players / secondary players in NBA history. He's a Swiss Army knife, can do a little bit of everything. He's a 3-time NBA championship, a 3-time All-Star, and that is Draymond Green. He's been voted a top 15 player in the league 2 times, getting a second All-NBA team in 2016 and a third team in 2017, along with winning Defensive Player of the Year. And he's always just been a winner, looking at his 2 Final Four appearances at Michigan State during his 4-year college career. And that's kind of what I want to talk about here with Draymond Green, is the fact that he was a winner throughout college, got better every season, won numerous awards, was a consensus All-American, but for some reason, the fact that he stayed 4 years hurt his draft stock, and he ended up being a second-round pick instead of a lottery pick. So just because someone stays in college 4 years, it makes them somehow less valuable to a player who's coming out at 19, 20, that's going to need a couple years to develop anyways, unlike someone like Draymond Green who could come into the league right away and give you immediate impact. Just something to think about there for all the GMs out there. So moving on to number 2, and probably one of the more underrated players of the last 15 to 20 years, drafted 47th overall by the Utah Jazz, Paul Millsap. So he's a 4-time All-Star, and similar to Draymond Green, he's an all-around solid player with no one strength or any one weakness. And he's number 1 all-time in win shares for second-round draft picks since 2000. And he's a consistent winner as he's made the playoffs in 11 of his 14 years in the NBA. And now, moving on lastly, so before I will... Let's go back a little bit. So at number 5, we had Nikola Jokic, the young 7-foot point guard center from the Denver Nuggets. Number 4, Lou Will. Number 3, Draymond Green. Number 2, Paul Millsap. And lastly, my number 1 overall, best second-round draft pick since 2000, Marc Gasol. And it's interesting, before we saw Marc Gasol in the NBA, his rights were actually traded for his own brother. And that actually, in retrospect, that was a very successful trade for the Lakers, although they did lose out on Marc Gasol, who's perhaps one of the greatest European players of all time. So Marc Gasol was traded to Memphis in 2007, 2008. That leads to back-to-back titles for the Lakers. Gasol goes on to the Memphis Grizzlies and is probably arguably the greatest player in Memphis Grizzlies history. He makes 2 All-NBA teams, 2015 first team, 2013 second team. He's a 3-time All-Star. He wins the 2013 NBA Defensive Player of the Year, so we now have 2 second-round picks that have gone on to be the best defensive player in the NBA. Pretty remarkable. He also won silver medals in the 2008 and 2012 Olympics, losing both years to Team USA. And he has kind of revolutionized the center position, kind of like a Bill Walton-esque, great passer, especially the further and further he comes into he went into his career, adjusted to this new 3-point generation, and has learned to be a very adequate 3-point shooter. And to top it all off, he reached the top of the tower and was a 2019 NBA champion for the Toronto Raptors. So he's had a very successful career. Perhaps I'd say a top 10, top 15 European player of all time. So that's your list for you guys today. And on Nick's picks, we did best second-round draft picks since 2000, starting with number 5, Nikola Jokic, who perhaps will be number 1 on this list once it's all said and done. Number 4, Lou Will. Number 3, Draymond Green. Number 2, Paul Millsap. And number 1, Marc Gasol. If you have any disagreements or want to say something about this list, please feel free to reach out on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And as always, thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you to all, and to all, a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.